Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us today. For those of you who haven't joined us before, our team has hosted these calls weekly since March of 2020 to provide nonprofits with critical resources and updates, a shared space to discuss challenges, a snapshot of relevant policies, and timely insight from subject matter experts. Since that time, the Forbes Funds and GPMP have hosted 5,632 meetings with the participation of over 48,069 dedicated community members, discussing emergent needs and opportunities for the social impact sector. We do all of this utilizing a dual framework that draws on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the social determinants of health to align cross-sector and guide the outcomes of our work. Additionally, the 8 returns model guides how we measure the success or returns on various forms of investment. For today's call, we encourage you to go ahead and use the chat function to share your name and organization with the group, as well as any comments or questions you might have during today's call. We also strongly encourage you to join us on screen in order to maximize engagement. We'll reserve time for a Q&A after our speaker presentation, followed by a Forbes Funds GPMP ecosystem updates and a public policy recap from our GPMP director, Emily Francis. And as a friendly reminder, there will be a poll at the end of the call. Please do complete that survey so we can keep our content and our resources relevant to you all. Today, we have with us Patrick Fisher, CEO of the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council, and he's going to give us an advanced preview on ArtPulse, an innovative data dashboard designed to address the nonprofit arts sector's lack of standardized annual data on financial sustainability, operational capacity, and social impact. Anticipated to launch in May 25, ArtPulse will provide organizations, funders, and policymakers with actionable insights through key health and sustainability indicators, dynamic visualizations, and year-over-year comparisons. By empowering stakeholders with data-driven decision-making, ArtPulse aims to strengthen advocacy efforts, improve resource allocation, and create a more resilient ecosystem. Patrick is an innovative leader. His identity and perspective has been shaped by unconventional life experiences, including formative years in do-it-yourself venues and counterculture music scene, couch surfing while traveling abroad, living in a dry cabin in Alaska, and traveling across North America in a van with his 3-legged dog while paying off student loan debt. Since beginning his career in nonprofit arts in 2016, he has spent nearly a decade breaking down barriers, fostering inclusivity, and empowering communities, championing the arts as a catalyst for connection and transformation. So before we get started today, I'm going to stop sharing and ask Fred to, there we go, ask Fred to join us to open the call, and then we will pass it over to Patrick. Fred?
Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all. It's a sunny day, so hopefully people get some time out to walk. It's great to see Patrick. I think it was just with Patrick 2 weeks ago, maybe. I want to say that Patrick brings a different depth and breadth to the sector. He's very insightful, honest, and transparent. I enjoy meeting with him and working with him as a result of his passion for the work. And so I'm interested to hear the new tool that they've created and how it might be applicable in our nonprofit ecosystem. Lastly, I want to say how important it is historically, how art has been part of every revolution at some degree, and critical in rallying people through multiple mediums. And so I'm interested to hear Patrick's view on how we might meet some of the challenges that are emerging in this new economy and what role art might play, as well as what are the opportunities for people to collaborate with his vision. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. We'll pass it over to you.
Sorry, I didn't hear you, Christine. Were you saying it's my turn to jump in now?
Yes, oh, sorry. Passing it over to you. Thanks so much, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you all. I appreciate being here with you this morning and having an opportunity to speak about our work and some of the initiatives that we're driving here at the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council. I see through the chat function that we have a number of folks with us today that work in the arts sector, being actually employed with arts organizations. I'd also like to encourage, if you are on today's call and you serve in any volunteer capacity with an arts organization, whether it be on the board of an organization or any other function, please feel free to identify that in the chat function this morning as well. Great to know, who's representing who in today's conversation. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to present this morning on, as was mentioned, ArtPulse, which is a new initiative that we are leading here at the Arts Council and hoping will maybe serve as a national model for other arts councils across the nation. To begin, though, I'd like to give a little bit of an introduction about the Arts Council. So we are what's referred to as a local arts agency, sometimes referred to as an LAA, and we serve Southwestern Pennsylvania. There are arts councils in cities and regions across the nation. We are part of a network of art service organizations, and here in our ecosystem, we specifically work to build a more resource-connected and informed art sector. We do this by empowering artists and arts organizations so that they have the resources, relationships, and opportunities they need to thrive right here in our region and not feel like they need to go elsewhere in order to make their mark or share their message. We are predominantly an organization that disseminates information throughout our sector, amplifies the work of our sector, and then advocates for the needs of our sector. So when thinking about our mission in action, first and foremost, we serve as an information hub. We do that by sharing essential resources, including grant opportunities, industry research, and information about funding and professional development. And at the end of today's presentation, I'll talk on a few other initiatives that we're doing, integrating new technologies to advance our service model as an information hub. We're also an amplifier. We work to elevate the voice of artists and arts organizations in our region. We do this by helping tell their stories through features and interviews and public relation efforts. And part of that is to really recognize the abundance of talent and the abundance of activity that exists within the arts sector in this region, and really hoping that amplification helps drive participation and engagement by the broader community. We also serve as a convener, so we work to foster meaningful connections within the arts sector. An example of that would actually be occurring tomorrow if you're interested. We will be hosting our monthly networking event for artists, arts educators, and arts workers called Creative Hive. With that, every month we convene at a different location within our sector. And March's meetup will be held at Community Forge in Wilkinsburg. And we typically have anywhere from 50 on the low end and sometimes on the high end, upwards of 100, 125 folks that come out. And it's just about strengthening the connections within our sector. And then finally, we are an advocacy leader. So we work to monitor legislation, advocate for public policies that are supportive of our sector, and mobilize stakeholders when necessary around specific campaigns. And that's to secure art-centered policies and funding to ensure that the arts remain part of our identity in this region. So a little bit of overview about what we're working on here. This is the third arts community that I've worked in an official capacity, but I've been involved with the arts throughout the nation in informal capacities as well. And what I've realized from city to city, community to community, is that oftentimes there's not standardized annual data that really is actionable as it relates to the art sector. A lot of organizations might do their own annual reports, and certainly grant funders require grant applications and grant reports that collect some data, but there's nothing that's been standardized. And because there's nothing that's been standardized, it's been really hard to monitor the progress of the sector year after year and determine, are we improving, are we staying the same, or are we recessing in certain areas? And because we don't have that information, it's been really difficult to really make data-driven decisions, both at a sector level, but also at the organizational level. So ArtPulse aims to bridge this gap by providing year after year analysis at the organization level, and then taking that information and lifting it upward to a sector level. And our hope is that this information that we will be collecting and monitoring will empower organizations, strengthen capacity, and foster a more sustainable arts sector. So to do this, we are partnering with a company out of Baltimore, Maryland called EcoMap Technologies. And what really led us to EcoMaps as a solution to this longstanding challenge was their experience working within the entrepreneurial ecosystem. They've done quite a bit of work in that space, and we felt like a lot of what they were doing in the entrepreneurial ecosystem was actually transferable to the arts ecosystem. And we thought it would be a really interesting partnership if they could, potentially leverage their experience to help solve a longstanding challenge on our end. And then with us, we could leverage our position within a very specific ecosystem and sector to see if it's a sandbox worth exploring for them, and maybe branching out into new business directions beyond just the entrepreneurial space. And it's worth noting that the COO of EcoMap, Smitha Gopal, is actually a Pittsburgh native. And so even though she lives and works in Baltimore, still maintains very close relationships to her family here in Pittsburgh. So it's great that we're able to make that connection between Pittsburgh and Baltimore. We are launching this pilot with funding from the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, which we then matched with funds from our annual award from the Allegheny Regional Asset District. And our hopes is that if ArtPulse does here in Southwestern Pennsylvania what we believe it can, that our relationship with the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts would then lead to other arts ecosystems across the state adopting this dashboard, so that not only would we have data at the local level and at the regional level, but then we could work to get this data at the state level, which is really important to our state level advocacy efforts, because for the last 16 years, the budget for the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts and the grants that they administer throughout the Commonwealth has remained flat. And with inflation, the purchasing power of those grants is worth less today than it was, 16 years ago. So having state level data will also hopefully help with our state level advocacy. So a little bit about this approach. So the first a thing that we really wanted to consider when thinking about data entry is, how do we take into consideration some of the fatigue that exists as a result of multiple surveys and multiple reports that occur anytime throughout a fiscal year or calendar year. Many arts organizations are often operating with a limited capacity and a smaller staff, and oftentimes not someone that's specifically dedicated to grant writing and reporting. So these responsibilities can often fall on either the CEO or the executive director, or somebody at the programmatic level. And we recognize that this fatigue is real, and these capacity constraints are very much felt by arts organizations. And we wanted to be as mindful and responsible as possible to try to circumvent any unnecessary reporting. So for the first portion of this platform, we are actually going to be looking to public sources like 990s and utilizing AI to data mine public information, so that we don't have to ask folks to again enter in information that they've entered elsewhere. And the hopes would be is that we can accurately scrape that data build into the model all of the calculations that need to occur in order to secure the data points to tell the story, and then leave the rest of it to like the operational capacity side and the programmatic impact side, leave that to direct answers that folks would be contributing. And we think that this will help ensure that people actually don't view these reports as a barrier, but something that's an asset to them and their organization. And then from a data analysis side, what folks will receive is a visually appealing dashboard that plots the trends for their organization. And then we will take those organizational trends and build them up to a sector level analysis. But by this, we will offer annual comparisons where an organization is able to track its progress year after year against itself, but then also look at how our other organizations at similar budget sizes compared against them. At the sector level, we will be able to look at it as a comprehensive view, break it down by zip code, and look at one zip code compared to another, and then also look at it at a budget level size as well to determine, are there trends at the micro level that we should be aware at, and not just at the macro level. And we believe that, this analysis will really help organizations have a more accurate picture of themselves, but also will equip them with data that allows them to take action based off of what they learn about themselves. So expected impact and benefits. So for organizations, we think this will provide them with critical insights into their financial and operational health, and then help them identify where are they performing strongly, what risks are on the horizon that they should be mindful of, and then what are their opportunities for growth. And by streamlining the data collection portion of the analysis and offering sector-wide comparisons, we hope that organizations will be better informed to make data-driven decisions, strengthen their sustainability, and then enhance their ability to secure funding. Because essentially they can take the data that they receive through this dashboard and integrate that into their funding applications, their case for support, their annual reports, and their marketing collateral, however they see fit. For funders and policymakers, we think that this will give them a better understanding of both organizations and the sector's health, allowing them to allocate resources more effectively and think about not just plugging immediate holes and gaps, but really thinking about long-term sustainability. And we hope that this transparent aggregated insight will enable better decision-making and improve the trust and credibility of the work that we're doing as a sector. And for the Arts Council ourselves, as a leading voice in advocacy, this data and being able to have annual data will really help support our advocacy efforts and how we meet with policymakers and how we meet with funders and how we, take a look at our progress as a sector. And again, the areas that might need the most immediate addressing based off of challenges or opportunities. And the hope would be is if we saw a broader rollout of this, we could also then compare ourselves to other communities, whether that be within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania or if others such as, Detroit or New Orleans or Nashville adopted this platform, then we could also benchmark our art sector against other communities' art sectors. So how will the dashboard look? So what we're looking at right now is just the framework, the mock-up of the ecosystem level. So this is just looking at the financial indicators alone, but we're looking at things like operating reserve ratio, revenue diversity, grant dependency, program efficiency, sustainability, fundraising efficiency, right? Like really looking at some of these key areas of financial capacity and sustainability, And what those multiple lines measure at the ecosystem level is looking at one budget tier against another budget tier. So if you look at revenue diversity, the line that is pointing to right now would be tier 1, which would be annual budgets less than 100,000. So each of those lines would represent a different budget tier, and it would give a year-over-year comparison to show whether it's, like I said, improving, maintaining, or declining at the ecosystem level. And at the top, by the header of the revenue category, such as revenue diversity, you would have a very clear indicator of this is declining by 15% or this is increasing by 15%. What I will share is that this is all just a hypothetical framework right now. While Ecosystems is building it, we haven't populated it with data yet, so don't be concerned that this showing a 15% decline in revenue diversity is not factual data. It is just a placeholder to demonstrate how the dashboard will look. But under things like operational capacity, we would take a look at things like turnover, the number of staff that or percentage of staff that are receiving a household sustaining wage, percentage of staff that are eligible for health insurance, percentage of staff that are eligible for retirement planning, those types of things that would be looking at operational capacity. And then for programmatic impact and social impact, it would be taking a closer look at number of individual serves and the outcomes that are delivered as a result of that service. This is what it would look like at the organizational level, very similar framework. The one line would be the organization themselves. The second line would be an average of their budget size. So if you're an organization that is less than 100,000 a year as a budget, you could compare yourself against the average and determine, are you above average, at average, or below average? And again, the objective would be to give year-over-year analysis so you can tell you know, where you are improving, where you're declining, and where you're maintaining. And the hopes would be is that this would really help inform really strategic conversations at the board level, as well as at the staff level. So thinking about how you're engaging your board around those really critical governance issues, and thinking about when you might be undergoing a leadership transition, what are the skills you should be recruiting for, what are the kind of challenges that the incoming leader might have in mind, might have to take on, but really just give a much more clear, transparent year after year analysis of the organization. So what's the road ahead look like? As I mentioned, is right now we are in the development phase. We are having essentially weekly meetings right now with EcoMaps to discuss framework and processes and where the data could come from, what organizations we would anticipate participating in the reporting process, and you know how some of those calculations might need to be conducted. We are anticipating a pilot launch in May 2025. This probably would not include a broad rollout in May, but accepting, you know, a handful of organizations at every budget level to participate so that we could test the model with real world data, and then also gather feedback from the organizations that contribute and participate so that we could refine the tool if necessary to improve it before doing a broad rollout. And then the future vision of this, you know, is somewhat multifold. If operating specifically in the arts and the arts alone, I would love to see this adopted throughout the Commonwealth. As I mentioned, we have funding from the PCA because they're interested in this as a pilot, but I would really love to see this broadly adopted at a national level as well. And as I mentioned, you know, we're part of a network of local arts agencies, so I'll be similarly presenting to them on this work once we have that pilot rolled out. I also think that at a local level, we have the opportunity to serve as an example, as a pilot for just the nonprofit sector as a whole. What really helped inform some of this process was when I was in Erie, Pennsylvania, leading Erie Arts and Culture, their community fund through their nonprofit partnership, worked with the county to implement an initiative called Erie Vital Signs. And Erie Vital Signs was a similar dashboard for the entirety of Erie County, and some collaboratively identified indicators and metrics that the county felt was important to determine the future and present moment of Erie County in comparison to its past. So I would love to see ArtPulse similarly serve as a potential pilot model for other markets in Pittsburgh, and then something comprehensively for the region as a whole. So other initiatives that we have in the works that are utilizing new technology. One is we're working with EcoMaps to help build out a resource map. So this would be a centralized tool that would connect artists and arts workers, as well as arts organizations, to the resources, opportunities, and assets that are most relevant to them. The way we're building this out right now is across 3 categories. So first, we're looking at space-based resources. So if you're an artist and you're interested in artist preferred affordable housing, or you're a visual artist and you need a studio space, or you're a musician and you need a recording studio, or you're a dancer and you need a rehearsal space, we're working to actually map those out through this tool, so that as an artist or arts worker navigating the ecosystem, you know what is available to you. The second we're looking at is funding-based resources, predominantly grants and fellowships. So, you know, we're doing this right now through our monthly blog post, where we do an opportunities roundup, where we share calls to artists and grant opportunities and other things. But that is requiring us to actively find those opportunities and bring them into our website. And it is very much static, because the moment it posts, it is outdated. Whether an opportunity is filled, or the application cycle closes, or something new pops up, it's not reflected in that blog post because it's static. The final category for this asset map would be professional development-based resources. So artist residencies, cohorts, workshops, symposiums, those types of things. We have a really robust network locally of art service organizations that do that type of work, whether it's Boom Concepts, Bridgeway Capital, ShiftWorks, Community and Public Arts, Radiant Hall. And what I have found is that a lot of times artists just simply aren't aware of what all is available to them. So we want to make sure that we are helping bring that all into a centralized location, while also thinking about national resources like Creative Catalyst and others that are also doing virtual workshops and symposiums and other things that artists in our community should be aware of. So we're really excited about that resource map coming online this summer. We're also working to resolve a longstanding issue of a comprehensive calendar. Pittsburgh doesn't have an offering challenge, it has an awareness challenge. There is so much that's occurring here, but oftentimes people don't know about it until after it's over, and they don't have enough time to think about what their attendance and participation would mean. So other communities that I've worked in have tried to resolve this, and typically it is an approach that you create a new third-party site, you have folks enter information into that site, and then you hope that folks utilize that site as an information source when making a decision. An example of that would be a past initiative of the Arts Council here with Artsburg, where we made an attempt to say, okay, arts organizations, upload your events to this calendar, and then the Arts Council will push it out into the community so that folks are aware of it. But one, it leads to marketing fatigue for arts organizations because there's already so many calendars they have to upload their events to. But two, there's a lot of effort that has to go to change consumer behavior to get them to use a new calendar versus a site they maybe have a long-standing relationship with. So what we're going to do through this comprehensive calendar is we'll work with arts organizations to train them on best practices for having the events listed on their own websites. So if you're Confluence Ballet, you don't need to go to another calendar and upload the event. We're just going to train you on the best practices for uploading it on your own website. So whether you're a museum or a performing arts organization or a literary arts group, we want to train you in the best practices on having the events on your own website. And then we'll work with EcoMaps to, again, do data mining and scrape those websites for that information and bring it into a centralized calendar that we will then push and promote. But we're not going to do it alone. We recognize we have really great partners in our community like WQED and WESA and Next Pittsburgh and others that are always promoting arts events or looking for events to cover by way of write-ups and reviews. And the goal would be is to push that calendar out to those media partners and leverage their networks and their audiences to really ensure that there's broad awareness of what's going on within our community. The last one is not supposed to say AI-powered events calendar, but AI-powered concierge. Our strategic plan called for us to think about the entry point that folks have with the Arts Council and how they can be directed to either the most appropriate resources and information or most appropriate team member as quickly as possible. So we have worked with Skill Builder to develop Artsy, which is an AI-powered concierge that we're still training, but essentially it will be a 24/7 AI assistant that is present on our website that can receive and respond to inquiries in 230 different global languages, which helps empower and give individuals agency to ask and receive answers in real time that is convenient for them while saving our staff time and allowing us to focus on higher level impact initiatives. So with this, the way we've been training Artsy is we've been thinking about all the site visits and studio visits we do with artists and thinking about what are those frequently asked questions that we get or when we're asked to present to groups, what are the things that we're asked to present on? And we're building that into our AI concierge. So some of it is about navigating the Arts Council in particular, like maybe our Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts program or our Creative Sector Flex Fund grant. While the majority of it is actually about navigating the arts ecosystem as a whole, at a national level, at a regional level, and at a local level. So whether you are an organization with a small budget, a mid-sized budget, or a large budget, we are working to integrate information into this concierge that is relevant to you. Or if you're a visual artist, a performing artist, or a literary artist, whether you're emerging, mid-career, or established, again, we're working to integrate information into this AI-powered concierge that would be relevant to you. And that should all go online early summer this year. So here's my contact information. I'll share this out. I'm going to correct a few typos in this, but then I'll share this out so folks can have it should they have any questions and want to contact us. But that's a little bit about the initiatives that we're working on here.
Thank you so much, Patrick. That was fantastic. I know as someone who dedicates a lot of my energy to volunteering with arts organizations, this is very exciting and I feel very empowered. I mean, this audience has heard a lot from us about data and AI and, it's here. How are we going to work with it? And I think you've exemplified perfectly how it can really empower even sectors like the arts sector that, sometimes AI and arts may be at conflict, but you're finding ways to make it work for you. And again, it's just really great to see that we're empowering artists and the arts organizations, especially in a time where, it's really precarious right now. So thank you. We do have a few questions in the chat, so I'll get right to them. Our first question was from Beth, wondering what kind of data was being collected beyond 990s.
Yeah, so we're working with EcoMap to kind of build all that out, and part of it will also come from the pilot rollout, hearing from organizations what data would be most helpful to them. On the financial side, it's pretty much all being scraped from 990s. And then we've worked with EcoMap to identify like what are the calculations and equations that need to occur in order to actually give meaningful data points. I mentioned some of the things on the operational side, and somebody did mention salary analysis. We are working to integrate in there some information about salaries. What I want to be super mindful of is that we have to build a culture around transparency. And if we start with, I think, all of the aspirational data that we'd love to see in there, we likely will have organizations that don't participate because they're not ready for that degree of transparency. So really thinking about how do we roll this out over time and build our culture and bring our culture forward in the process so that folks don't view this as either an obstacle or hurdle or something that would be harmful to their organization to share. Really thinking through how we advance that culture of transparency and realizing that it's all done through trust and relationship. All of the information that's collected at the organizational level will be maintained privately by that organization. We are working with funders to talk with them about what would it mean to integrate that into their application processes, which is not very different from some of the things that presently occur with SMU Data Arts through funders like Hines and RAD and others. But at the starting point, all of it would be maintained at the organizational level, and organizations would have the full authority on whether or not they want to share it out to others. But really that more that trust-based philanthropy data and some of the larger big issues around equity, I think we have to really advance a culture of trust and transparency before we could expect a high degree of adoption and utilization.
And then Stuart is asking, I'm sure you're aware of Data Arts Cultural Data Project. It sounds like this is meant to be a bit more lightweight and streamlined. Am I understanding correctly that it's similar but easier on organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. So being very candid and transparent, it's a little bit silly to me that we are using in Allegheny County an organization out of Texas to collect and interpret data when we have organizations locally that can collect and interpret data. The challenge with data arts, and while they've been a longstanding expert in the field, is when you're filling out the cultural data project fields, it's not in the way that most nonprofits that I'm aware of collect and report financial data. So you're having to take information from your own financial records and manipulate it some in order to fit the fields in the cultural data project. So yes, it is similar. Some could even say competitive, but you're also right, a lot more streamlined and easier for organizations to navigate. It's not public yet, but I do know that Data Arts is also going through a shift and that they are looking at their own sustainability around the cultural data project and whether or not it will continue. So it also creates a alternative option should they decide to sunset that initiative.
Great, thank you. So we did touch on the salary question, and I saw that Emily was asking what some of the specific important indicators and implications of telling the story for arts-focused or arts-based organizations as well as for individual artists?
Yeah, so I'll use my own experience as a direct example. You know, when I interviewed for this position a little over, well, about 2 years ago, I guess at this point, I think that the board thought the organization was in a different place than what it actually was. And it wasn't until I came on board and we started to do a deep analysis of our financials and our impact and our operational capacity that we realized that the organization's wellness and sustainability was highly compromised. And I think that if you have that information on the front end when going through a leadership transition, it can really help you think about what are the skill sets you should be prioritizing in your next executive leader. Or when you're thinking about board transition and you need to recruit new board members, if you have this type of data that is actionable, how are you thinking about, you know, the skill sets you need to recruit for at the board level? It also, I think, helps have really honest conversations with funders. I had to go to a lot of funders when I joined and be very transparent around where we were at as an organization. And I wish that we were equipped with data like this that could have actually shown a year after year analysis to kind of indicate this isn't something that just popped up overnight. And I think that really kind of looking at those trends helps you stay ahead of it, right? You can have your yellow flags pop up when they need to be popping up, and then you can have your red flags pop up when it's super critical that you start to have a conversation. So I really think that this type of analysis helps organizations have much more honest conversations that then can inform their recruitment, their strategy, their fundraising efforts. But ultimately too, you know, we're going to come to a point, and this is probably not a popular topic to bring up, but where some organizations need to discuss potentially merging, potentially sunsetting, because what they're doing is not sustainable in present models. And if they cannot identify ways to make it more sustainable, then the most responsible thing to do for their mission is to think about what is the next step, whether that's a merger, whether that's a sunset, whether it's a completely new model of doing and being. So I think that this just helps really have honest conversations at the strategic level for both organizations and funders. And then for us, you know, we often have advocated from a perspective of economic impact, and that's fine, but it's also very one-dimensional. And I think being able to have better data that is more comprehensive about social impact and the sustainability of the sector helps us really push for more arts-friendly policies as well as, you know, art-supportive funding as well.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for all of this hard work. We're excited to see where it goes.
A
Let me
question.
double check. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, Patrick, can you share with the audience what you think the new pivot you're taking will have as an impact on the sector, and what does success look like for the optimization of AI and the voice of the arts and the platform you're developing?
Yeah, ultimately, it's for organizations to have a better understanding of themselves so that they can figure out, you know, where are their opportunities, where are their vulnerabilities, but also how do they utilize resources in the most responsible way possible. I think that that's, you know, again, I'll use our own organization as an example, but recognizing that there were things at a strategic level and at an operational level we probably needed to address before we ever tried to expand and grow and you know, do some of these outward facing initiatives that we led. And if we would have looked at, do we have the capacity to actually not only pull this off, but sustain it, we could have been better stewards of both the trust and the resources that were given to us. So ultimately, you know, I hope that this leads to organizations being more aware of themselves and having greater agency and self-determination in their decision making, but then also being really great stewards of the trust and resources that are granted to them. And ultimately it's about making sure that the arts remain a part of our region's identity. You touched on it at the start of this conversation, but the arts have played a very important role throughout, most eras and stages of modern civilization, including moments of civil unrest and revolution. And I think that our region in particular has a long history of the arts, and really making sure that we are not at risk of losing that because we find ourselves in a steady decline that we weren't willing to have a conversation about and then develop revolutionary approaches to maybe interfere and take different steps and approaches.
Great. Thank you so much, Patrick. As I mentioned in the chat, we'll be happy to follow up with resources in order to get in touch with Patrick and see the slideshow in our newsletter and on the GPMP member portal. And I'm going to pass it over to Emily for our public policy updates. Thanks again, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Thank you, Christine. And Fred, I really appreciate your question because that's one of the things that I think, and listening to Patrick's presentation comes up a lot for GPNP as well, as we're thinking through, individual organizations, but also large system-wide conversations and benefits and how this fits into broader context. So Patrick, as you were presenting, my wheels were just turning because I think a lot of the same work that you're doing on behalf of artists and arts-based organizations, we're having some of the same conversations with our members with GPNP. So definitely, I'm going to organize my thoughts first, then I'll reach out. A couple of upcoming things for the Forbes Funds team. First, the Transformative Leadership and Golf cohort is going to be starting back up. I see a couple of familiar faces on the call for folks who have participated in the past. As a reminder, Dr. Hannah Karolak on our team is leading this work, and this is a opportunity for leaders to work on their golf game, yes, but also utilize golf as a metaphor for leadership and agile leadership specifically, as we're seeking to transform ourselves to the benefit of transforming the system. And so this info session is taking place next Wednesday, March 26th, from 8 until noon, and it's going to be at First Tee Pittsburgh. And that's where all of the sessions are hosted for the Transformative Leadership cohort. We have a great partnership with Eric Amato and his team. And we're really grateful to keep this cohort moving since I think it's been 4 different rounds that we've done the Transformative Leadership cohort now. This Thursday, oh, go ahead, Hannah.
If I could just jump in quickly. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Emily. Just wanted to say that it's this Wednesday, March 26th, and you don't have to stay the whole time. You can drop in, drop out, bring a friend. We're gonna have some snacks. We'll be playing golf, outside if the weather permits, and then also we have the simulators downstairs. So drop by and learn more about the cohort, or just take some time to visit us. And either way, we look forward to seeing you. Thanks, Emily.
There we go. Of course. And I'm biased. I was a graduate from the first round of the cohorts, but I think they're absolutely fantastic. I was fortunate enough to have Dr. Kathy Humphrey in my cohort group. And so just in terms of like the leadership connections and the different opportunities you have to talk to folks who are at different points in their nonprofit career, or, on boards of nonprofit organizations, really working to solve some of the same challenges, 30 years down the road. So it's a really great opportunity for anybody who's connected to our work. And then this Thursday, Public Policy Committee meeting is at 1 p.m. until 2:30 p.m. This is an opportunity for us to talk through some updates, given the update or the policy update from this morning, but then also go through some advocacy and legislative priorities since this year is a summit year. So we'll be setting the intention for the panel discussions, lead up events with municipal and local government elected officials, as well as members of Congress from the state and federal levels for the summit this year, and also talking through the implications of a lot of the policy shifts that we're seeing at the federal level, and talking through how those are going to impact us in Southwest PA. So first, that's really what we're starting with this morning. A couple of states in the US, including Pennsylvania, are attempting to reallocate federal highway funds towards public transit and bicycle infrastructure, general infrastructure projects in response to funding shifts. However, in a secondary response, the Trump administration has also threatened to cut federal funding in response to those shifts, shrinking that budget further. So, nothing has been put in place yet, but it is a threat at this point. But the federal government stance is likely to hinder state efforts to promote sustainable and alternative transportation options, even when states are looking at utilizing funds from different buckets to kind of fill some of those gaps. The impact for nonprofit organizations is mostly as a cross-sector partner in this space. So nonprofit organizations who have advocated for sustainable transportation and environmental initiatives are likely to continue facing challenges due to funding cuts that fund partnerships or grants that bring them funding to do so. This would also affect projects aimed at improving public transit and promoting cycling infrastructure. Just as a quick note from other conversations that we've been a part of, especially with the aging community, we have a post-agenda policy hearing tomorrow with city and county councils in Allegheny County and the AAA and a couple of the senior centers. And one of the things that we've talked about in many of our conversations on advocacy is the intersection of accessibility and public transit, particularly when it comes to seniors being able to access services. And so thinking through, yes, sustainable transportation, yes, environmental initiatives, and also how individuals access services at nonprofit organizations and community centers and other providers, especially at a time where there's a lot of critical needs that are rising. This is something that all nonprofits should really be paying attention to, since it's likely going to affect accessibility to your services at different locations. So things to keep an eye on: federal and state negotiations regarding transportation funding, and also being prepared to engage in advocacy efforts at the local level, but also as it relates to state and federal decisions, because they are going to affect our sustainable transportation initiatives here. Second, the federal workforce reductions and economic implications. So we've talked about this a few weeks in a row, but the Department of Government Efficiency is has laid off a significant number of people within the federal workforce, more than 200,000 federal jobs, which is about a 2.5% reduction in employment for the region, specific to Southwest PA. The reduction in federal employment is expected to have substantial economic repercussions, including an estimated $4.9 billion loss in wages for the DC metro area this year. And specifically for Southwest PA, a lot of our effects are going to be indirect. So, increased competition for funding and resources, yes, as the budgets are shifting, but also there's decreased communication from within these agencies as we're receiving updates on funds that have already been allocated or promised, or grants that are currently in effect that we're waiting to get reimbursed for. And so it's creating that, again, increased uncertainty as organizations that are relying on these partnerships and relationships will need to reassess strategies or seek alternative collaborations. I really appreciate what Patrick said around, organizations merging or working together differently to meet the new normal and the new standard of delivering services in a continuous way. And the best thing to keep an eye on is staying informed on other federal workforce reduction and budget allocations that could impact nonprofit funding and operations. Let me see. I'm going to switch to my other PowerPoint real quick. One moment. All right. Also, looking at immigration policy, this is something that we've spoken about weekly over the last couple of months. So Venezuela has agreed to resume accepting deportation flights from the U.S. following a suspension earlier this month. And there were a couple of miscommunications around that suspension as well. The initial flight under this agreement is scheduled currently or imminently. And the takeaway for this is that the resumption of these flights indicate a shift concerning how enforcement is going to look between the U.S. and specific countries concerning immigration. So organizations providing services not only to Venezuelan immigrants, but also immigrants in general, might need to adjust programs and address the changing landscape as conversations are had between the U.S. and certain countries, and offer different types of supports to affected individuals. I know we had one of our partners on last week to talk about, making resources accessible across all organizations in multiple languages to make sure that individuals who are immigrants or new Americans can access resources from all of our organizations, not only those who they're directly connected with, especially in times of increased uncertainty as we're working to make resources more available and equitable. And the other thing to do, again, across organizations, across the sector, is stay update on immigration policy changes, and stay up to date on what legal experts are saying to make sure that information is provided in an accurate way. And we did look at a kind of anticipated development in the next 30, 60, 90 days, because what we saw at the federal level, January 20th began very quickly to impact the nonprofit sector mid-February around DEI, where as there were offices or specific roles cut in very early January executive orders. We saw later in February that the National Science Foundation and specific grant opportunities and partnerships were going to mirror kind of the same things that were done at the federal level for those that impact nonprofit organizations. So within the next 30 days, kind of thinking through what some of the harbingers of this have been in the federal sector so far, nonprofit organizations should begin preparing for immediate impacts of federal funding shifts. We're already feeling those. So this is more of a continuation, and specifically for those for environmental projects and looking at advocacy to seek alternative funding sources is going to be crucial. Pardon me one second. Thank you. And then I'm actually, Christine, if you wouldn't mind talking through the last couple of slides here on the budget, that would be really helpful, because I cannot stop coughing.
Yes, take care. And we've also put the questionnaire up on the screen. So as Christine's getting ready to lead us through, please make sure that you do answer that. Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. All right, so the federal budget and avoiding the shutdown. On March 14th, Congress passed a short-term spending package, continuing resolution or CR, to avoid a partial government shutdown. The Senate passed the bill with bipartisan support, and President Trump signed it into law just before the midnight deadline. So this CR extends funding for certain parts of the government through May, giving lawmakers more time to negotiate the full year federal budget. And specifically, the CR funded 6 out of 12 federal appropriations bills, including defense, veterans affairs, and transportation. The remaining 6 bills, including Homeland Security and Education, were still being negotiated, and another deadline looms for those. You able to go to the next slide, Emily?
I can. Sorry, I got my coughing under control. I can jump back in.
You're good.
Thank you for doing that.
We're gonna keep rolling with it. Thank you.
Thank you. So related to the continuing resolution, this is something that took place last week. And so this funded, as Christine shared, multiple appropriations bills. But what is a continuing resolution? It's a stopgap measure that temporarily funds the government at last year's spending levels to kind of continue, maintaining services to prevent a shutdown because Congress hasn't passed the full or all 12 full year funding bills. And so this is not a kind of permanent solution. It's something that continues the work to take place at current funding levels. We know, just kind of as a side note, that needs are increasing as inflation and other economic downturn items affect constituents. And so yes, this continuing resolution did narrowly prevent a shutdown, but it is only temporary. And there are also a ton of disagreements remaining on extremely controversial items around, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion programs, climate funding, how that's impacting, university funding. I'm sure you've seen a lot of the headlines between the Trump administration and specific universities around their policies, and looking at, kind of a looming deadline in May. That's when lawmakers have to agree on a full budget or pass another continuing resolution to avoid those shutdowns. And so as this is kind of a stopgap to May, potential new stopgap continuing resolution in May, we looked at, kind of implications for the budget later this year. So until a full budget is passed, many nonprofits or programs are going to be funded at prior year levels, delaying expansion, or we can anticipate some cuts. And so that affects planning for nonprofits relying on federal grants, especially in health, education, and housing. There's an increased likelihood of deep cuts or riders. So President Trump and House Republicans are pushing for major budget cuts, including the elimination of certain agencies. I know, everybody has heard about the Medicaid conversation because we had Southwest Pennsylvania Partnership on Aging present a couple of weeks ago. And it, again, is this kind of continuing uncertainty if we continue these stopgap measures versus passing a full year of funding measure. So we are likely to see more continuing resolutions, keeping nonprofits and other government contractors in limbo, also recognizing that the funds are continuing to mirror past year levels versus reflect what is likely to be increased for demands and services and programs. And so this is going to continue disrupting program delivery and delay project launches or hiring that would continue that work on its usual cycle. Additionally, backloaded budget decisions are likely. So with so much being pushed to May or potentially later, the bulk of the federal budget may be decided all at once, which might limit public input and increase chances of significant changes slipping through without time for media or independent journalists to be able to do any sort of analysis to communicate to constituents what the likelihood of impacts from those funding changes might be, which is a risk to transparency. And so one thing to keep in mind is that bipartisanship is still essential within Congress. So I know that the headline review is very doom and gloom this morning. One thing to keep in mind kind of as we're moving forward that is hopefully a little bit lighter note is that 60 votes are still needed to pass most budget-related legislation unless it's done through reconciliation. So Republicans do not control 60 seats. There's a narrow majority or close to the 50-50 split. We saw in the most recent continuing resolution, there were multiple Democrats that had to vote in favor of the Republican in favor of the continuing resolution to continue moving forward to avoid the government shutdown. And in the House, Republicans do hold a majority, and it's a very slim majority, and also very internally divided on specific issues. And so there are different caucuses and different kind of groups that we're seeing some kind of divisions and conversation around. And so the bottom line is that bipartisanship and cohesive policymaking is still essential to continue doing this work and to push this budget through successfully. So I mentioned the May budget deadlines. One thing that nonprofits should also consider is changes to or look for is changes to discretionary programs tied to federal grants, policy riders that may restrict use of funds for certain programs or populations, opportunities to mobilize constituents and advocate for priorities during this key negotiation window. So between now and May is really that time for the state budget plan. We've talked about having October through December conversations. So those are the changes that can make it into the budget's plan or the governor's budget plan in January, rather than having to wait until May to kind of change minds and really negotiate and advocate at this time. But this remains a really critical time to have those conversations, especially at the federal level when there's been so much uncertainty, and this kind of is that new kind of update window. So that's really it. So opportunities to influence bipartisan negotiation is still strong, especially by aligning with moderate Republicans and Democrats, because there are still some, key language opportunities. And I'll turn it back to Christine to close us out on our last slide here. If you have not finished the slideshow or the poll this morning, please do so, since we utilize that data to improve the speaker topics and the call for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. I know that was a ton of information in a very short amount of time. We appreciate it. As a reminder, the recording for this will be available on the GPMP member portal later today, and then also on YouTube later this week, and in our newsletter on Friday. So thanks again, everybody. Lots to take in today. And next week we have, let's see. Sorry, I thought we were still sharing screen. There we go. Next week, we will have Twin Cities Innovation Alliance. So yeah, with Asim Shabazz, and we are very excited to have him to come and talk with us. Have a great week. Thanks again for being here, and we'll see you next week.